The dust-choked air of Terlingua, Texas, carried the sounds of jeering and angry voices through the scorching summer heat of 1875, as Olivia Moore stumbled through the main street, her wrists bound with rough rope that cut into her skin. Blood trickled down her forearms, mingling with the sweat and dirt that covered her torn blue dress. Behind her walked Sheriff Jenkins, his weathered face twisted with a self-righteous grimace as he periodically yanked the rope, causing Olivia to fall to her knees against the hard, packed earth. "Let all witness what becomes of a woman who forsakes her marriage vows," Jenkins shouted to the gathering crowd. "This harlot will be dragged through our God-fearing town until every citizen has seen her shame." Olivia's long auburn hair hung in tangled strands around her face, partially obscuring the bruises that marked her cheeks and the split in her lower lip. At 25, she had already endured more suffering than most would know in a lifetime. The townspeople of Terlingua, those she had once considered neighbors, now lined the streets, their faces contorted with disgust or perverse fascination. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the crowd's taunts. "I've done nothing wrong." The sheriff yanked the rope again, harder this time. "Silence! Your lies won't save you now." From the far end of the dusty street, Samuel Zimmerman watched the horrific scene unfold. His tall frame was motionless against the backdrop of the town's only saloon, the Silver Dollar. His hand instinctively moved to the well-worn Colt revolver at his hip, his fingers brushing against the smooth handle. At 32, Sam had seen the darkest aspects of human nature during his time riding with the Texas Rangers, but this display of public humiliation turned his stomach. He had arrived in Terlingua only 3 days prior, seeking nothing more than a quiet place to rest before continuing his journey south. The town, nestled in the shadow of the Chizos Mountains, had appeared peaceful enough, a collection of weathered buildings, a small but bustling mining operation, and people who kept to themselves. It was exactly what Sam had been looking for after leaving the Rangers 6 months ago. Now, however, as he watched the young woman being dragged through the streets like an animal to slaughter, he felt the familiar anger rising within him, the same righteous fury that had led him to join the Rangers in the first place. Enough. The word escaped his lips before he'd made a conscious decision to speak. It was too quiet, swallowed by the crowd's jeering. Sam pushed himself away from the saloon wall and stepped into the street, his spurs jingling with each deliberate stride. The crowd began to part before him, recognizing the dangerous determination in his eyes and the confident way he carried himself. Even those who didn't know him could sense that he was a man accustomed to violence, though he did not seek it. "I said enough." This time his voice boomed across the street, cutting through the noise like a thunderclap. Sheriff Jenkins halted, his grip on the rope momentarily slackening. Olivia collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath, her eyes rising to meet the stranger who had interrupted her humiliation. "This doesn't concern you, mister," Jenkins spat, his free hand moving toward his own pistol. "This woman has been judged by the town council for adultery and abandoning her husband. Justice is being served." Sam's gaze never wavered as he continued walking forward, stopping only when he stood directly between the sheriff and Olivia. Up close, he could see the fear and exhaustion in her emerald eyes, the silent plea for mercy. Something inside him shifted, a recognition, perhaps, of the same weariness he carried in his own soul. "I don't see justice here," Sam replied, his voice steady but cold. "I see a mob and a lawman who's forgotten what that badge stands for." The crowd had fallen silent now, watching the confrontation with bated breath. A few hands moved toward weapons, but no one dared to intervene yet. "You best step aside, stranger," Jenkins warned, his fingers now resting on his holstered pistol. "Unless you want to find yourself in a cell or worse." Sam didn't move. Instead, he knelt down beside Olivia, his eyes never leaving the sheriff's. With one swift movement, he drew a knife from his boot and cut through the ropes binding her wrists. She gasped, pulling her bloody hands to her chest. "Can you stand?" he asked quietly. Olivia nodded, though uncertainty flickered across her face. Sam offered his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it, allowing him to help her to her feet. The sheriff's face had turned a dangerous shade of red. "You are interfering with the law, sir." "One more step and I'll have you shot." "The law," Sam scoffed, turning to face Jenkins fully now. "I rode with the Texas Rangers for 10 years. I know the law. And this," he gestured to Olivia's bloodied wrists, "isn't it?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. The Texas Rangers were respected and feared throughout the territory, even by those who claimed authority themselves. "This woman's been accused of a crime," Jenkins insisted, though his voice had lost some of its conviction. Her husband is a liar and a monster." Olivia spoke for the first time, her voice stronger than Sam expected. "And you know it, Jenkins. The whole town knows it." An older woman at the front of the crowd stepped forward. "She speaks the truth. We've all seen what Victor Moore does to her, the bruises she tries to hide." "Shut your mouth, Margaret," Jenkins snapped. "Victor is a respected businessman. Victor is a drunk who beats his wife," another voice called out from the crowd. It was the town doctor, a normally reserved man who now stood with his shoulders squared. "I've treated her broken ribs, Sheriff. Twice." Sam's jaw tightened as he listened to the revelations. He'd seen enough men like Victor Moore in his time, men who believed ownership of a woman gave them the right to destroy her. "So this is Terlingua justice." Sam addressed the crowd now. "A woman tries to escape a violent husband, and you drag her through town like a criminal." He turned back to Jenkins. "Where is this husband now? I'd like to have a word with him." "That's none of your concern," Jenkins replied, but the uncertainty in his eyes told Sam everything he needed to know. "He's at the saloon," someone in the crowd volunteered. "Where he always is this time of day." Sam nodded, then turned to Olivia. "Can you walk?" She straightened her shoulders, a flicker of strength returning to her eyes. "Yes." "Good. We're going to the saloon, and you're going to tell your story, your true story, to anyone who will listen." He glanced back at Jenkins. "And if the sheriff here tries to stop us, I'll remind him what real law looks like." The threat hung in the air, clear and undeniable. Jenkins' hand fell away from his gun, and he took a step back. "This isn't over," the sheriff warned, but his words carried little weight now that the crowd had begun to murmur among themselves, the tide of public opinion visibly shifting. "You're right about that," Sam agreed, offering his arm to Olivia. After a moment's hesitation, she took it, leaning slightly against his steady frame as they began walking toward the Silver Dollar Saloon. The crowd parted for them, some faces showing shame, others curiosity, and a growing respect. Sam didn't know what awaited them in the saloon, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't going to stand by and watch an innocent woman suffer, not while he still had breath in his body. As they walked, Olivia glanced up at him. "I don't know your name," she said softly. "Sam." "Samuel Zimmerman." She nodded, a ghost of a smile touching her lips despite the pain. "Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman." "Sam," he corrected gently. "Just Sam." "Then thank you, Sam," she whispered, her fingers tightening slightly on his arm. "I'm Olivia." "I know," he replied, his gaze fixed ahead on the saloon's swinging doors. "And I promise you, Olivia, no one's going to drag you anywhere ever again." The Silver Dollar Saloon fell silent as Sam and Olivia entered, all eyes turning toward the unlikely pair. The interior was dim compared to the harsh sunlight outside, and it took a moment for their eyes to adjust. The smell of cheap whiskey, tobacco, and unwashed bodies hung heavily in the air. At the far end of the bar stood a man whose eyes narrowed dangerously at the sight of Olivia. Victor Moore was a large man, his once muscular frame now softened by drink but still imposing. He slammed his glass down on the bar and stood, his face contorted with rage. "What the hell is this?" he bellowed, advancing toward them. "Jenkins was supposed to teach you a lesson, you ungrateful whore." Sam felt Olivia tense beside him, but she didn't shrink back. Instead, she lifted her chin, though her hand trembled slightly where it rested on his arm. "That's far enough," Sam warned, his voice level but carrying an unmistakable threat. Victor halted, sizing up the stranger who stood beside his wife. "This doesn't concern you, mister. That's my property you're touching." "She's not property," Sam replied coldly. "She's a woman who deserves better than what this town has given her." By now, townspeople were filing into the saloon behind them, eager to witness the confrontation. The barkeeper, a heavy-set man with a magnificent mustache, reached beneath the counter likely for a shotgun but thought better of it when he caught Sam's warning glance. "Olivia," Sam said without taking his eyes off Victor, "why don't you tell everyone why you left your husband?" She hesitated, years of fear and silence weighing heavily on her. Then, with a deep breath, she stepped forward. "3 years ago, I married Victor Moore because my father owed him money," she began, her voice quiet at first but growing stronger with each word. "He promised to forgive the debt if I became his wife. My father was dying and I agreed." Victor took another step forward. "You made vows before God, vows you broke the first time you raised your hand to me," Olivia shot back, surprising even herself with her vehemence. "3 weeks after the wedding, he broke my cheekbone because dinner was cold." A murmur ran through the crowd. Victor's face darkened. "Dr. Coleman treated me," Olivia continued, turning to where the doctor stood near the door. "He knows. He's treated me many times." The doctor nodded grimly. "It's true. Burns, broken bones, cuts that needed stitching. I've seen it all on this poor woman." "The last time," Olivia said, her voice faltering slightly, "was 2 weeks ago. He caught me saving money I earned doing laundry and mending for folks around town. Said I was planning to leave him. He was right, of course." She pulled up her sleeve, revealing a burn in the shape of a cigar. "He said he'd mark me so everyone would know I belonged to him. She's lying." Victor roared, but the uncertainty on the faces around them showed that few believed him now. "The next night," Olivia continued, "I took what little I'd saved and tried to leave on the midnight stage. Sheriff Jenkins caught me at the station and brought me back. Said a woman can't leave her husband without permission. That's when Victor suggested this punishment, to make an example of me." The saloon had fallen deathly quiet. Even the most hardened men present shifted uncomfortably, unable to justify such cruelty. "Is that the kind of town you want to be?" Sam addressed the crowd. "A place where men can treat women worse than animals and call it justice?" Margaret, the older woman who had spoken up in the street, pushed her way forward. "I've seen the bruises. We all have. We just looked away." She turned to Olivia, shame evident on her weathered face. "God forgive us, child. We should have helped you." Victor, sensing the tide turning against him, made a desperate lunge toward Olivia. "You're my wife. You'll come home now," or he never finished his sentence. Sam's fist connected with his jaw with a sickening crack, sending the larger man sprawling onto a nearby table, which collapsed under his weight. Victor lay motionless amid the splintered wood and spilled drinks. "Anyone else think this woman deserves punishment for trying to escape that?" Sam asked, looking around the room. No one spoke. Even Sheriff Jenkins, who had followed them into the saloon, remained silent. His earlier bravado evaporated in the face of public opinion turning against him. "I'm leaving Terlingua," Olivia announced, her voice steady despite the emotion visible in her eyes. "Today, and I'm never coming back." "You'll need protection on the road," Sam said quietly. "I'm heading south myself. I'd be honored to escort you to the next town at least." She turned to him, really looking at him for the first time. He was handsome in a rugged way, with deep blue eyes that spoke of kindness despite the hardness of his expression. His dark hair was longer than was fashionable, curling slightly at the collar of his worn duster. Most importantly, though, he had stood for her when no one else would. "Thank you," she said simply. "I accept," Victor groaned, beginning to stir among the wreckage of the table. Sam glanced down at him with contempt. "Someone should lock him up," Sam suggested, looking pointedly at Jenkins. "For assault, at the very least." The sheriff hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "I'll see to it. And if I ever hear that he's been released and has gone looking for his wife," Sam added, his voice dropping dangerously low, "I'll come back. You understand me?" Jenkins swallowed hard and nodded again. Margaret stepped forward, taking Olivia's hands in her own. "Come to my place first, dear. Let's clean those wrists and get you some proper traveling clothes, maybe some food for the journey." Other townspeople began to offer help as well: money, supplies, words of encouragement. The same people who had jeered at her in the street now seemed desperate to make amends, their consciences awakened by her bravery and Sam's intervention. Sam watched it all with a mix of satisfaction and lingering anger. It shouldn't have taken a stranger's arrival for these people to do the right thing. But at least they were doing it now. As Margaret led Olivia toward the door, the young woman paused and looked back at Sam. "Will you wait for me?" "I won't be long," he nodded, something warm stirring in his chest at the trust in her eyes. "I'll be right here." 3 hours later, Olivia emerged from Margaret's modest home wearing a practical traveling dress of dark green cotton, her auburn hair freshly washed and braided, her injured wrists bandaged. She carried a small carpet bag containing her few possessions, and the gifts the townspeople had pressed upon her in their remorse. Sam was waiting outside with 2 horses his own chestnut gelding, and a gentle bay mare he'd purchased from the livery with some of his dwindling funds. He helped secure her bag to the saddle and offered his hand to assist her mounting. "Do you ride?" he asked. "My father taught me," she replied, taking the reins confidently. "Before everything," he nodded, pleased. "It would make their journey easier. We should make it to Alpine by nightfall if we ride steady," he said, swinging into his own saddle. "There's a decent hotel there where you can rest properly." She looked back at Terlingua one last time, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to face the open road ahead, her shoulders squared with newfound determination. "I'm ready," she said simply. They rode out of town side by side, the setting sun casting long shadows before them. Neither looked back at the town that had failed her so completely. Whatever lay ahead, it had to be better than what they were leaving behind. As the distance between them and Terlingua grew, Sam noticed Olivia's posture gradually relaxing, as though each mile added a little more freedom to her spirit. They rode in comfortable silence for the first hour, the rhythmic sound of hoofbeats and the occasional call of a desert bird the only interruption to their thoughts. "Why did you help me?" Olivia finally asked as they navigated a narrow path that wound between towering red rock formations. "You don't know me. You had no reason to risk yourself." Sam considered her question carefully, watching as a hawk circled lazily in the darkening sky above them. "I've seen too many people look the other way when someone needed help," he said finally. Done it myself sometimes. But there comes a point when you can't just ride past anymore. She studied his profile, noting the way his jaw tightened slightly at whatever memory had surfaced. You were a Texas Ranger, you said, he nodded. For 10 years. Joined up when I was 22, just a kid thinking I could make the frontier a safer place. A wry smile touched his lips. Found out it wasn't that simple. Why did you leave? The question hung between them, and for a moment, Olivia thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was quieter, touched with regret. Last winter, we were tracking a gang that had been robbing stage coaches near the border, caught up to them in a small town much like Terlingua. There was a shootout. A little girl got caught in the crossfire. He paused, his eyes fixed on the horizon. She didn't make it. I'm sorry, Olivia said softly. It wasn't my bullet that killed her. The gang leader shot her when he was trying to escape, but I was in charge of that operation. I should have been more careful, should have cleared the street. He shook his head. After that, I couldn't wear the badge anymore, turned it in and started riding south, no particular destination in mind. She absorbed his story, understanding the weight he carried. So you're running too? Sam glanced at her, surprised by her perception. I suppose I am, in a way. The path widened as they emerged from the rock formations onto a flat stretch of land. In the distance, the Chizos Mountains loomed against the darkening sky, their peaks tinged with the last golden rays of sunlight. What will you do now? Sam asked, steering the conversation away from himself. After Alpine, I mean. Olivia's hand unconsciously touched the small pouch hanging from her belt, which contained the money she'd saved and the additional funds the townspeople had given her out of guilt and compassion. I have a cousin in San Antonio, she replied. She wrote to me last year, offering a place to stay if I ever left Victor. I didn't respond, I was too afraid he'd intercept the letter, but I memorized the address. Her voice strengthened with resolve. I can work. I'm good with a needle and I can read and write better than most. Perhaps I could find employment in a shop or as a teacher's assistant. Sam nodded, impressed by her determination. Many women in her situation would be broken by what they'd endured, but Olivia seemed to grow stronger with each passing mile. San Antonio is a good city, he said. Growing fast, you'll find opportunities there. They lapsed into silence again, each lost in their own thoughts as the landscape gradually changed around them, the stark beauty of the desert giving way to more varied terrain as they approached the foothills of the Davis Mountains. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they spotted the scattered lights of Alpine in the distance. The small but thriving town served as an important stop on the railroad line and boasted several businesses catering to travelers. We'll find rooms at the hotel, Sam said as they approached the outskirts of town. Get a proper meal and rest. Tomorrow we can decide the best route to San Antonio. Olivia nodded gratefully, fatigue evident in the slope of her shoulders despite her determination not to show weakness. The events of the day, the public humiliation, the confrontation, the escape had taken their toll, and the hard ride had only added to her exhaustion. Alpine's main street was busier than Terlingua's, with several saloons doing brisk business and a variety of shops that had closed for the evening. At the far end stood a 3-story hotel with a sign proclaiming it the Alpine Grand. It was hardly grand by city standards, but compared to the rough accommodations in Terlingua, it seemed positively luxurious. They stabled their horses at the livery adjacent to the hotel, paying extra to ensure the animals would be well fed and groomed. Then, with Olivia's carpetbag in hand, Sam escorted her into the hotel lobby. The clerk behind the desk looked up as they entered, taking in Olivia's simple traveling dress and Sam's worn ranger attire with a practiced eye. "Good evening," the man said, his tone polite but reserved. "How may I help you?" "We need 2 rooms for the night," Sam replied, reaching for his money pouch. The clerk's eyebrow rose slightly as he glanced between them, clearly making assumptions about their relationship. "I see. And will you be registering as?" "Mr. Samuel Zimmerman," Sam supplied firmly, "and Miss Olivia Moore. Separate rooms, please." Understanding dawned on the clerk's face and his manner became more respectful. "Of course, sir. We have 2 suitable rooms available on the 2nd floor. They're not adjoining, but they are on the same hallway. Will that be acceptable?" Sam looked to Olivia, who nodded. "That will be fine," she said. The clerk pushed the register toward them, and they each signed their names. Sam paid for both rooms despite Olivia's quiet protest. "You can repay me by joining me for dinner," he said with a small smile. "I hate eating alone, and the dining room here is supposed to be quite good." She hesitated, then returned his smile with a tentative one of her own. "Very well, thank you." The clerk handed them their keys and directed them to their rooms. Sam insisted on escorting Olivia to her door first, carrying her bag and making sure the room was secure before leaving her to refresh herself. "Shall we meet in the dining room in half an hour?" he suggested. "Yes," she agreed, looking more relaxed now that they were safely away from Terlingua. "I'll be there." As Sam turned to leave, Olivia called after him softly. "Sam," he paused, looking back. "Yes, thank you, not just for everything today, but for treating me with respect. It's been a long time since anyone has." Something tightened in Sam's chest at the simple gratitude in her voice. "You don't need to thank me for that, Olivia. It's what you deserve, what everyone deserves." Her smile deepened, reaching her eyes for the first time. "Nevertheless, thank you." With a nod, he left her to rest, heading to his own room to wash away the dust of the road and change into his one clean shirt. As he did so, he found himself thinking about Olivia's smile and how he'd like to see more of it in the days ahead. The dining room of the Alpine Grand was modestly elegant, with white tablecloths and polished silverware that reflected the warm glow of oil lamps. When Sam entered, freshly shaved and wearing his best, and only, clean shirt, he spotted Olivia already seated at a corner table. She had changed into a simple blue dress that complemented her auburn hair, which now hung loose around her shoulders, its natural waves catching the lamplight. For a moment, Sam simply stood in the doorway, struck by how different she looked from the frightened, battered woman he had first seen being dragged through Terlingua. Even with the healing cut on her lip and the fading bruise on her cheek, she was undeniably beautiful. She glanced up, catching him watching her, and a faint blush colored her cheeks. Sam made his way across the room, nodding politely to the other diners as he passed. "You look." He hesitated, searching for a word that wouldn't sound too forward. "Rested," he finished awkwardly, taking the seat across from her. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Thank you. It's amazing what clean water and a moment of peace can do." She gestured to the pot of tea on the table. "I took the liberty of ordering tea. I hope you don't mind." "Not at all," he replied, grateful for something to occupy his hands as he poured himself a cup. "Have you had a chance to look at the menu?" The waiter approached before she could answer, and they both ordered the beef stew, a safe choice in a frontier establishment, as it tended to be more forgiving of tough meat than other dishes. As they waited for their food, a comfortable silence settled between them, neither feeling the need to fill it with unnecessary words. It struck Sam as unusual. In his experience, silence with a new acquaintance was often awkward, but with Olivia, it felt natural. Perhaps they had already shared enough intensity for one day. Finally, Olivia spoke, her voice soft but steady. "I realized I never asked where you're headed. You said south, but that's a big direction. Sam rotated his teacup slowly, considering his answer. I don't have a specific destination. Just away, I suppose. I thought maybe Mexico eventually. Start fresh where no one knows me. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Running from memories. Something like that, he admitted. Though I'm learning they tend to follow you no matter how far you ride. The waiter returned with their stew, the rich aroma filling the air between them. For a few minutes, they ate in appreciative silence, the hearty meal a welcome change from trail rations. This is good, Olivia remarked, breaking off a piece of crusty bread to dip in the gravy. I haven't had a proper meal in, well, some time. Sam noticed how thin her wrists were, how her collarbone stood out prominently beneath her skin. Victor didn't feed you well, he observed, keeping his voice neutral despite the anger that flared within him at the thought. She kept her eyes on her bowl. Food was a privilege I had to earn, she said simply, and I rarely earned it, according to him. Sam's hand tightened around his spoon. I should have hit him harder. That earned him a small, surprised laugh. You hit him plenty hard, I'd say. I've never seen Victor laid out like that before. It was. She hesitated, then admitted, satisfying to watch. He deserved worse, Sam said darkly. Yes, she agreed, her expression growing somber again. But I don't want to think about him any more tonight. Tell me something about yourself instead. Something good. Sam thought for a moment, searching for a pleasant memory to share. I grew up in East Texas, near the Louisiana border. My father was a carpenter, a good one. He taught me the trade, but I was too restless to settle into it. Wanted adventure? He smiled ruefully. Found plenty of that with the Rangers, though not always the kind I was looking for. Do you have family still? She asked. My parents passed within a year of each other, about 5 years back. I have a younger sister who married a shopkeeper in Dallas. We write occasionally. He took another bite of stew, then asked, What about you? Any family besides the cousin in San Antonio? Olivia shook her head. My mother died when I was 12. My father raised me alone until his health failed. He was a school teacher, taught me everything he knew. We moved to Terlingua when I was 18 because he heard the dry air might help his consumption. A shadow passed over her face. It didn't. He lasted less than a year. By then, he'd borrowed money from Victor for doctors and medicine. When he died, Victor came to collect. And offered to forgive the debt if you married him, Sam finished, remembering what she'd said in the saloon. Yes, he presented it as generosity, said he'd fallen in love with me from afar. Her mouth twisted bitterly. I was naive enough to believe him at first. Thought perhaps I could learn to care for him in return. That lasted until our wedding night. Sam didn't press for details, but the implication was clear enough. I'm sorry, Olivia. Don't be, she said, meeting his eyes squarely. It's over now. I'm free of him thanks to you. You were already escaping when I arrived, he pointed out. You had the courage to try. Most people in your situation never even get that far. She considered this, then nodded slowly. Perhaps, though I might be back in his house now or dead if you hadn't stepped in when you did. The waiter returned to clear their empty bowls, offering coffee and dessert. They both accepted the coffee but declined the dessert, content with the satisfying meal they'd shared. As they sipped the strong, bitter coffee, Olivia asked, Will you really accompany me all the way to San Antonio? It's a long journey, and you said you were heading south. Sam hadn't fully decided until that moment, but as he looked at her across the table at the strength and vulnerability combined in her clear green eyes, he knew his answer. San Antonio is south of here, he said with a small smile. And I'd feel better knowing you arrived safely, if you don't mind the company, that is. Relief flickered across her face. I don't mind at all. In fact, I'm grateful for it. They finished their coffee in companionable silence. both aware that something had shifted between them, a tentative trust forming that neither had expected when the day began. As they rose to leave the dining room, Sam noticed Olivia sway slightly on her feet, the fatigue of the day finally catching up with her. Without thinking, he offered his arm for support, and she took it gratefully. "You need rest," he said as they climbed the stairs to the second floor. "It's been a long day." "The longest," she agreed, stifling a yawn behind her free hand. "But also, strangely, one of the best. Is that odd?" "Not at all," Sam replied softly. "Sometimes the worst days and the best ones are the same. They're the days that change everything." They reached her door and Olivia released his arm, fishing the key from her pocket. She unlocked the door but paused before entering, turning to face him. "Good night, Sam," she said, her voice warm with genuine gratitude. "Thank you for dinner, and for, well, everything." "Good night, Olivia," he replied. "Sleep well. I'll meet you for breakfast at 7 if that's not too early. 7 is perfect." She hesitated, then added softly, "I'm glad you were the one who happened to be in Terlingua today." Before he could respond, she slipped into her room and closed the door gently behind her. Sam stood there for a moment longer, staring at the closed door with a strange mixture of emotions churning within him. He was glad, too more glad than he could properly explain, even to himself. The journey from Alpine to San Antonio would take at least a week on horseback, following the winding trails through the hill country. They set out early the next morning, the rising sun casting long shadows across the dusty road ahead of them. Olivia rode with increasing confidence as the days passed, her body remembering the skills her father had taught her in childhood. She seemed to draw strength from the open sky and endless horizon, as though each mile between her and Terlingua allowed her to reclaim a piece of herself that Victor had stolen. They fell into an easy rhythm, riding for most of the day, stopping to rest when the sun was at its highest, and making camp each evening before darkness fell. Sam was surprised by how capable Olivia proved to be, gathering firewood, helping to prepare their simple meals, and never complaining about the rigors of the trail. On the third night, as they sat beside their small campfire in a sheltered grove of oak trees, Sam found himself watching Olivia across the flames. She was mending a small tear in her riding skirt, her needle flashing in the firelight as she worked with practiced efficiency. "You're staring," she said without looking up from her task. Sam blinked, embarrassed at being caught. "Sorry, I was just thinking." "About what?" she asked, tying off her thread and cutting it with a small pair of scissors from her sewing kit. He hesitated, then decided on honesty. "About how different you seem now compared to when we met." She set her mending aside and looked up at him, the firelight casting warm highlights in her auburn hair. "Different how?" "Stronger," he said simply. "More yourself, I think." A small smile touched her lips. "That's perceptive of you." "I do feel more myself with each passing day. It's as though I'm waking up after a long, terrible dream." She stared into the fire, her expression thoughtful. "Do you know, I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to make decisions for myself, even small ones like when to eat or what to wear." Sam nodded, understanding. Control is a powerful thing. Taking it away from someone is one of the cruelest things you can do. "Yes," she agreed softly. "And the strange thing is, it happens so gradually that you hardly notice it happening. First, it's just easier to wear the dress he prefers to avoid an argument. Then it's changing how you speak, who you talk to. Before you know it, you're a shadow of yourself, tiptoeing through your own life, terrified of doing anything wrong." The pain in her voice made Sam's chest tighten. "But you found the courage to leave," he reminded her. "That takes remarkable strength." She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "I wasn't always strong. For 3 years I let him. I endured things no one should have to endure. I told myself it was my duty, that I'd made vows before God. Survival isn't weakness, Olivia, Sam said gently. And those vows go both ways. He broke his promise to honor and cherish you the first time he raised his hand. She nodded, drawing her knees up to her chest and wrapping her arms around them. That's what I finally realized. It wasn't until he caught me saving money to leave that I understood he would never change. That night after She gestured vaguely to her arm where the cigar burn was healing. I lay awake listening to him snore and knew I would die if I stayed. Either he would kill me in one of his rages, or my spirit would just fade away completely. Sam stared into the fire, his jaw tight with anger at what she had endured. I've seen men like Victor before. They don't stop. They can't. The need to control, to dominate, it consumes them. Have you ever? She began, then stopped, seemingly unsure how to phrase her question. Hurt a woman? Sam finished for her, meeting her gaze steadily. No, never. I was raised better than that. My father taught me that a man's strength was for protecting those who needed it, not for causing fear. Relief flickered across her face. He sounds like a good man, your father. He was, Sam agreed, his voice softening with memory. Simple, hardworking, honest. Everything I tried to be, though I think I complicated things more than he ever would have. By joining the Rangers, she asked. He nodded. He didn't understand why I couldn't be content with carpentry, with staying in one place and building a life there. But I had this idea that I needed to do something bigger, something that mattered. A rueful smile touched his lips. Took me years to realize that the quiet life he lived mattered just as much, maybe more. Olivia studied him thoughtfully. It's not too late, to build that kind of life. Maybe, he conceded, though doubt colored his tone, after what happened with that little girl. I'm not sure I deserve that kind of peace. We've all made mistakes, Sam, she said softly. The fact that you care so deeply about what happened, that you hold yourself responsible even though it wasn't your fault, that shows the kind of man you are. Her words touched something deep within him, a wound that had been festering since that terrible day. No one, not even his fellow Rangers, had offered him that kind of absolution. Thank you, he said simply, unable to elaborate on the emotions her words had stirred. They fell silent, the crackling of the fire and the chorus of night insects filling the space between them. After a while, Olivia yawned, covering her mouth with her hand. You should get some rest, Sam suggested. I'll take first watch. She nodded, moving to her bedroll and settling beneath the light blanket. As she lay down, she turned to look at him once more. Sam. Yes, I'm glad you're here, she said softly. Not just because it's safer, but because I enjoy your company. A warmth that had nothing to do with the fire spread through his chest. I enjoy yours too, Olivia. Now get some sleep. She smiled and closed her eyes, her breathing soon evening out into the rhythm of deep sleep. Sam watched over her for a long time, marveling at the strange twist of fate that had brought them together and wondering, for the first time in months, if perhaps there was still a chance for him to find peace after all. The days that followed brought them through increasingly verdant country as they left the arid western regions behind. The hills were carpeted with wildflowers, bluebonnets, Indian paintbrush, and golden coreopsis, creating a riot of color against the green landscape. The abundant beauty seemed to lift both their spirits, and they found themselves talking more freely as they rode. Olivia shared stories of her childhood, of her father's patient teaching and her mother's love of poetry. Sam told her about his time with the Rangers, focusing on the good they had done, the families they'd protected, the outlaws they'd brought to justice, the communities they'd helped to build. By unspoken agreement, They avoided the darker topics of their pasts, preferring to dwell on pleasant memories and observations about the world around them. Yet the shadows remained, occasionally visible in a faraway look or a sudden silence. On the fifth day of their journey, they encountered another traveler on the road, an elderly peddler with a wagon full of wares, heading west toward El Paso. They shared his fire that evening, trading news and accepting his hospitality. The old man assumed they were husband and wife, and neither corrected him, finding it simpler to maintain the pretense for one night. As they prepared their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire, Sam caught Olivia watching him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. "What is it?" he asked quietly, mindful of the peddler already snoring nearby. She shook her head slightly. "Just thinking how strange life is. A week ago I was trapped in a nightmare I thought would never end. Now I'm here, under the stars, free to go wherever I choose." Her eyes held his across the fire. "It doesn't seem quite real sometimes." "It's real," he assured her, "and no one's going to take that freedom from you again." She smiled, her face softening in the golden firelight. "Good night, Sam." "Good night, Olivia." The next morning, they bid farewell to the peddler and continued on their way. The trail grew more traveled as they approached the outskirts of Kerrville, a town large enough to boast a proper hotel and several businesses. "We should stop here for the night," Sam suggested as they crested a hill and saw the town spread before them. "Get a proper meal and a real bed. We could both use the rest." Olivia nodded, pushing a strand of hair from her face. "That sounds heavenly. I never thought I'd miss a real bed so much." They made their way into town, stabling their horses at the livery and securing rooms at the Kerrville Inn, a respectable establishment that catered to travelers on the San Antonio Road. After refreshing themselves, they met in the hotel's dining room for supper. Olivia appeared wearing the blue dress she had worn in Alpine, her hair freshly washed and falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked more rested than she had in days, the color returning to her cheeks and a certain lightness to her step that hadn't been there before. Sam rose as she approached the table, suddenly acutely aware of his own appearance. He'd done his best with what he had, shaving carefully, washing thoroughly, and putting on his clean shirt again, but he still felt rough-edged and unpolished next to her natural grace. "You look lovely," he said, the compliment escaping before he could think better of it. A blush colored her cheeks as she took her seat. "Thank you. It's amazing what a hot bath can do for one's spirits." The waiter brought them a bottle of wine with their meal, a luxury they hadn't indulged in on the trail. As they ate, Sam found himself noticing things about Olivia he hadn't fully appreciated before. The way her eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when she smiled genuinely, the graceful movement of her hands as she spoke, the musical quality of her laugh when something amused her. "Sam," she said, bringing him back to the present. "You were miles away." He smiled apologetically. "Sorry, just thinking." "About?" she prompted, taking a sip of her wine. He hesitated, then decided on honesty again. "About how different things might have been if we'd met under other circumstances. If you hadn't been married, if I hadn't left the Rangers." Her expression grew thoughtful. "I've wondered that too," she admitted softly. "But then we might never have met at all. I would still be in Terlingua and you might have passed right through without stopping." "True," he conceded. "Still, I wish." He trailed off, uncertain how to express what he was feeling. "What do you wish?" she asked, her voice gentle. He met her eyes across the table. "I wish you hadn't had to suffer so much before finding freedom." She reached across the table and, in a gesture that surprised them both, briefly touched his hand. "What's done is done. I can't change the past, but I can decide what to do with my future. That's what matters now." Her touch lingered in his mind long after she'd withdrawn her hand. They finished their meal in companionable conversation, discussing their plans for the final leg of the journey to San Antonio, which would take another 2 days at their current pace. As they prepared to leave the dining room, Sam noticed a poster on the wall near the door. It announced a small traveling show performing in the town square that evening: music, dancing, and various entertainments to break the monotony of frontier life. "Would you like to go?" he asked, gesturing toward the poster. "It might be a pleasant diversion." Olivia's face lit up with genuine excitement. "Yes. I haven't seen any kind of performance in years. Victor thought such entertainments were frivolous." The bitterness that flickered briefly across her face at the mention of her husband's name reminded Sam of just how recently she had escaped that life. Yet her resilience continued to amaze him: how quickly she embraced new experiences, how determined she was to reclaim the joy that had been denied her for so long. They made their way to the town square, where a small crowd had already gathered around a makeshift stage. Lanterns hung from surrounding trees, casting a warm glow over the scene. A trio of musicians played lively fiddle tunes while a man in a colorful vest acted as master of ceremonies, introducing various acts. Sam found them a place to stand near the back of the crowd, conscious of Olivia's slight frame beside him. When a particularly skilled fiddler took the stage and launched into a spirited reel, he felt her begin to sway in time with the music, her foot tapping against the packed earth. "Do you dance?" he asked, bending slightly to speak near her ear over the music. She looked up at him with a smile that transformed her face. "I used to love dancing. My father taught me when I was young." Without overthinking it, Sam held out his hand. "Would you like to?" Surprise and delight mingled in her expression. "Here, now," he nodded, feeling uncharacteristically bold. "Why not?" After a brief hesitation, she placed her hand in his. "I might be a bit rusty," she warned as he led her toward the area in front of the stage where several other couples were already dancing. "That makes two of us," Sam admitted with a smile. "It's been years since I've done more than watch from the sidelines." As they joined the dancers, Sam placed his hand respectfully at Olivia's waist, taking her other hand in his. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through him, but he focused on the steps, determined not to embarrass either of them. To his relief, they fell into rhythm together with surprising ease. Olivia followed his lead gracefully, her initial uncertainty quickly giving way to confident movement as the music flowed around them. When he spun her, the sound of her laughter, free and unguarded, made something in his chest tighten with an emotion he wasn't ready to name. They danced through 3 tunes before stepping aside to catch their breath. Olivia's cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright with exhilaration. "That was wonderful," she said, her voice breathless. "I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed dancing." "You're very good at it," Sam replied, aware that he was still holding her hand and reluctant to let go. She squeezed his fingers gently before releasing them. "So are you, Mr. Zimmerman. You've been hiding your talents." The rest of the evening passed in a pleasant blur of music, performances, and shared enjoyment. By the time they returned to the hotel, a comfortable warmth had settled between them, something more than friendship, though neither was ready to acknowledge it. At her door, Olivia turned to face him, her expression suddenly serious. "Sam, I want you to know something." "What is it?" he asked, concerned by her change in demeanor. "When we reach San Antonio and I go to my cousin's home." She hesitated, then continued, "I don't want that to be goodbye." "Not unless that's what you want." The simple admission caught him off guard. In truth, he had been avoiding thoughts of their inevitable parting, pushing them away whenever they surfaced. "It's not what I want," he said finally, his voice low and sincere. "But Olivia, your freedom is new. I wouldn't want to impose on that or rush you into anything." She smiled, understanding in her eyes. I appreciate that, and you're right, I do need time. Time to heal, to rediscover who I am without fear shadowing every moment. She took a deep breath. But I also know that meeting you has been the best thing to happen to me in years, and I'm not ready for that to end. Relief and something warmer flooded through him. Then it won't, he promised. We'll take things one day at a time, and when we reach San Antonio, we'll figure out what comes next. She nodded, visibly relieved by his response. Good night, Sam. Good night, Olivia. As he walked to his own room, Sam realized his steps felt lighter than they had in months. The weight of guilt and regret that had driven him to leave the Rangers was still there, but somehow less crushing. For the first time since that terrible day, he found himself thinking about the future with something approaching hope. The final leg of their journey to San Antonio took them through increasingly settled country, with more farms and homesteads dotting the landscape. As they approached the outskirts of the city on the afternoon of the seventh day, Olivia grew quieter, her expression thoughtful, nervous. Sam asked as they paused on a hilltop overlooking the sprawling town below. A little, she admitted. I haven't seen Cousin Martha since I was a child. What if she doesn't welcome me? What if she's moved or... She didn't finish the thought, but Sam understood her fear. If that happens, we'll figure something else out, he assured her. You're not alone anymore, Olivia. She gave him a grateful smile, straightening her shoulders with renewed determination. You're right. Whatever happens, I'll face it. They rode into the city as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. San Antonio was a bustling place, far larger than any town they'd passed through on their journey. The streets were filled with a diverse mix of people: Anglo settlers, Mexican families who had been there for generations, soldiers from the nearby fort, and traders of all descriptions. Following Olivia's directions, they made their way to a modest but well-maintained neighborhood on the eastern side of the city. She stopped before a white clapboard house with a small front garden filled with roses and herbs. This is it, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. This is the address she gave me. Sam dismounted first, then helped Olivia down from her mare. She smoothed her riding skirt nervously and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Would you like me to wait here? He asked, sensing she might want privacy for this reunion. She shook her head firmly. No, please come with me. Together they approached the front door. Olivia took a deep breath and knocked. For a long moment there was no response, and Sam could see the anxiety building in the set of her shoulders. Then the door opened, revealing a woman in her early 50s with graying auburn hair and the same green eyes as Olivia. Yes, the woman said, looking between them with polite curiosity. Can I help you, Martha? Olivia asked hesitantly. Martha Coleman. I'm Olivia Moore. Uncle Thomas's daughter. The woman's eyes widened in shock, her hand flying to her mouth. Olivia, little Livy. Her gaze swept over Olivia's face, recognition dawning. Oh my lord, it is you. I'd know those eyes anywhere, just like your father's. Before Olivia could respond, Martha pulled her into a fierce embrace. Child, I never thought I'd see you again, not after you married that man and stopped answering my letters. She drew back, holding Olivia at arm's length to look at her properly. Are you all right? What are you doing here? And who is this gentleman? Olivia's composure cracked, tears welling in her eyes at her cousin's warm welcome. This is Samuel Zimmerman. He helped me escape from Victor. He saved my life. Martha's expression grew serious as she took in the healing cut on Olivia's lip and the faint bruise still visible on her cheek. I see, she said, a world of understanding in those two simple words. Then she turned to Sam and extended her hand. Mr. Zimmerman, it seems I owe you a debt of gratitude. No debt, madam, Sam replied, taking her hand respectfully. "I only did what any decent person would do." Martha's shrewd eyes assessed him carefully before she nodded, apparently satisfied with what she saw. "Well, don't just stand there on the porch. Come inside, both of you. You look exhausted, and I want to hear everything." Over a hearty dinner at Martha's table, Olivia shared a simplified version of her ordeal and escape. Her cousin listened without interruption, though her face grew increasingly grim as the story unfolded. "I always feared something like this," Martha said when Olivia had finished. "Your father wrote to me when you were first courting, saying Victor Moore seemed like a fine match. But after the wedding, when your letters became so formal and infrequent, I suspected something was wrong." "I'm sorry I didn't reach out sooner," Olivia said softly. "He read everything I wrote, controlled everyone I spoke to." Martha reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "Don't you dare apologize, Olivia Moore. None of this was your fault. The important thing is that you're here now and you're safe." She glanced at Sam. "Thanks to Mr. Zimmerman's intervention." Sam shifted uncomfortably under her scrutiny. "Olivia would have found her way to freedom with or without me. She's remarkably strong." "Yes, she always was," Martha agreed with a fond smile, "even as a child. But strength doesn't mean you should have to face such things alone." She turned back to Olivia. "You'll stay here with me, of course. For as long as you need. The spare room is yours." Relief washed over Olivia's face. "Thank you, Martha. I don't know how to repay you." "Hush," her cousin interrupted gently. "Family doesn't need repayment. Besides, I've been rattling around this house alone since Harold passed 3 years ago. Having company will be a blessing." After dinner, Martha showed Olivia to the spare bedroom, leaving Sam alone in the small parlor. He stood by the window, looking out at the darkening street and feeling strangely adrift. Their journey was over. Olivia had found the sanctuary she sought. His promise to see her safely to San Antonio was fulfilled. He should feel satisfied, he thought. Proud even, that he had helped right a terrible wrong. Instead, he felt a growing emptiness at the thought of riding away from this house, away from her. The sound of footsteps made him turn. Martha stood in the doorway, studying him with the same shrewd expression she'd worn earlier. "Olivia is getting settled," she said, coming to stand beside him at the window. "She's exhausted, poor thing. The journey has taken a toll, to say nothing of what came before." Sam nodded, unsure what to say. "She told me more about you while we were upstairs," Martha continued. "Former Texas Ranger, heading south with no particular destination in mind." She gave him a sidelong glance. "Sounds like a man running from something." Her directness caught him off guard. "Perhaps I am," he admitted. "MMM." She considered this, then asked, "And what are your intentions toward my cousin, Mr. Zimmerman?" The question, plainly put, demanded an honest answer. "I care for her," he said simply. "More than I expected to. But she needs time and space to heal, to find herself again after everything she's been through. The last thing I want is to impose on her freedom when she's only just reclaimed it." Martha's expression softened. A considerate answer, and a wise one. She was silent for a moment, then added, "There's a boarding house 3 streets over. Decent place, fair rates. If you're looking for somewhere to stay while you consider your next move." Hope stirred in Sam's chest. "I wouldn't want to overstay my welcome here." "You helped bring Olivia safely to me when she had no one else to turn to," Martha replied firmly. "You'll always be welcome in my home, Mr. Zimmerman. But I think we both know that's certain. Propriety must be maintained, especially given Olivia's situation." He understood her meaning perfectly. Olivia was, technically, still a married woman. Her reputation was precarious enough without adding the complication of a man staying under the same roof, regardless of the innocence of the arrangement. "Of course," he agreed. The boarding house sounds ideal. And perhaps if Olivia is willing, I could call on her now and then, while I'm in San Antonio. A knowing smile touched Martha's lips. I think she would like that very much. She turned from the window, her expression becoming more serious. But Mr. Zimmerman, Sam, a word of caution. Olivia has been through a terrible ordeal. She's stronger than she appears, but healing takes time. I understand, he said. I won't rush her. She sets the pace. Martha studied him for a long moment, then nodded, apparently satisfied. Good. Now, would you like to say good night to her before you go? I believe she's still awake. Sam hesitated, then nodded. Martha led him upstairs to the spare bedroom door and knocked gently. Olivia, Mr. Zimmerman would like to say good night before he goes. Come in, Olivia called softly. Martha opened the door and stepped aside to let Sam enter, though she remained in the doorway, a subtle chaperone. Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, her hair loose around her shoulders, wearing what appeared to be a borrowed nightgown and robe. She looked small and vulnerable, but her eyes brightened when she saw him. You're leaving, she asked, a hint of disappointment in her voice. Just to a boarding house nearby, he assured her. Your cousin suggested it would be more appropriate. Understanding dawned in her eyes, and she nodded. Of course, will I see you again? The uncertainty in her voice tugged at his heart. If you'd like to, he said carefully. I thought I might stay in San Antonio for a while, get to know the city. Relief and something warmer flickered across her face. I'd like that very much. Then I'll call on you tomorrow, he promised. Perhaps we could walk in the park if you're not too tired from the journey. I'd enjoy that, she said, a small smile touching her lips. An awkward silence fell between them, both aware of Martha's presence in the doorway and the many things left unsaid. Well, good night then, Olivia, Sam finally said, taking a step back. Rest well. Good night, Sam, she replied softly, and thank you for everything. He nodded, unable to put into words all that he wanted to say. With a final glance, he turned and left, Martha following him downstairs to show him out. At the front door, she handed him a slip of paper with the boarding house's address. Mrs. Blackburn runs a tight ship, but she's fair and her rooms are clean, she said. Tell her I sent you. Thank you, Mrs. Coleman, Sam said, taking the paper, for everything. She studied him for a moment longer, then said quietly, You're a good man, Samuel Zimmerman. I can see it in your eyes. Whatever you're running from, I hope you find peace. With that, she closed the door gently but firmly behind him. Sam stood on the porch for a moment, looking up at the stars that were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. For the first time in months, the thought of staying in one place didn't fill him with restlessness or dread. San Antonio might be as good a place as any to stop running, at least for a while. With that thought, he turned and headed toward the boarding house, already looking forward to tomorrow and the chance to see Olivia again, not as a woman needing rescue or protection, but simply as herself, free and healing and full of possibilities. Spring turned to summer in San Antonio, the days growing longer and hotter as June gave way to July. For Olivia, the passing weeks brought a gradual blossoming not just of the roses in Martha's garden, which she tended with increasing pleasure, but of her own spirit as well. The nightmares that had plagued her in the early days after her escape became less frequent. The flinch that accompanied sudden movements or loud voices began to fade. She found work at a small dressmaker's shop 3 days a week, her skilled needlework earning her not just a modest income, but a sense of pride and independence she had nearly forgotten was possible. And through it all, Sam remained a steady, undemanding presence in her life. True to his word, he called on her regularly, taking her for walks in the park, escorting her and Martha to church on Sundays, occasionally joining them for dinner, or accompanying them to the small musical performances that were held in the town square on pleasant evenings. He had found work, too, putting his carpentry skills to use with a local builder who was constructing new houses as the city expanded. The physical labor seemed to agree with him, bringing a healthy color to his face and a relaxed confidence to his movements that had been missing when they first met. They never spoke directly about the nature of their relationship, both content to let it evolve naturally, without pressure or expectations. Yet Olivia found herself looking forward to his visits with increasing anticipation, her heart quickening whenever she caught sight of his tall figure approaching Martha's house. On a particularly warm evening in mid-July, Sam arrived after dinner with an invitation. "There's a dance at the community hall tomorrow night," he said as they sat on Martha's front porch, enjoying the relative coolness as the sun began to set. "I thought perhaps you might like to go. Both of you, of course," he added, including Martha in the invitation with a polite nod. The older woman chuckled, fanning herself lazily. "At my age, dance halls hold little appeal, but Olivia should certainly go. Young people need to enjoy themselves." Olivia hesitated, uncertainty flickering across her face. "I'm not sure if I should, because of Victor." Martha asked directly, never one to dance around difficult topics. Olivia nodded, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "Technically, I'm still his wife. People might talk." "Let them," Martha said firmly. "You filed the divorce papers, and everyone who knows you understands the situation. Besides, it's just a dance, not an engagement." Sam watched the exchange without comment, though Olivia could see the careful way he measured his expression, not wanting to influence her decision. "Would you like to go?" he asked simply when she remained silent. The question, direct and without pressure, helped clear her mind. "Yes," she admitted. "I would." "Then we'll go," he said with a smile that warmed his blue eyes. "I'll call for you at 7. The following evening, Olivia found herself standing before the mirror in her bedroom, critically assessing her appearance. The dress she wore was new, her first significant purchase with her own earnings from the dress shop. It was a deep forest green that complemented her auburn hair and brought out the color of her eyes, more fashionable than anything she had owned during her marriage to Victor, who had preferred her in drab, matronly garments that wouldn't attract attention. Martha appeared in the doorway, her expression softening as she took in the sight of her young cousin. "You look beautiful, Livy," she said warmly. "That color suits you perfectly." Olivia turned from the mirror, smoothing her hands nervously over the skirt. "Are you sure this is proper?" "Going to a dance when my divorce isn't yet final." Martha came to stand beside her, adjusting a lock of Olivia's hair that had escaped its pins. "In the eyes of God and any decent person, your marriage ended the moment Victor betrayed his vows by raising his hand to you. The law is merely catching up to what is already true." She squeezed Olivia's shoulders gently. "You deserve happiness, my dear. Don't let fear of gossip rob you of it." A knock at the front door signaled Sam's arrival. Olivia took a deep breath, steadying herself, then descended the stairs to meet him. The look on Sam's face when he saw her made any lingering doubts vanish. His eyes widened slightly, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. "You look—" he began, then shook his head slightly, a smile spreading across his face. "Beautiful doesn't seem adequate." The sincerity in his voice brought a warm blush to her cheeks. "Thank you. You look quite handsome yourself." It was true. Sam had clearly made an effort for the occasion, wearing a new shirt and vest, his dark hair neatly trimmed, his face freshly shaved. He offered his arm with a formal politeness that made her smile. "Shall we?" The community hall was transformed for the evening's festivities, with lanterns hanging from the rafters and wildflowers adorning every table. A five-piece band played lively tunes at one end of the room, and the wooden floor was already filled with dancing couples when Sam and Olivia arrived. Several heads turned as they entered, and Olivia felt a momentary flutter of anxiety at the curious glances. But the whispers that followed seemed more appreciative than condemning, and when Sam led her confidently onto the dance floor for a waltz, she found herself relaxing into the music and the solid strength of his arms. "You're still an excellent dancer, Mr. Zimmerman," she remarked as they moved smoothly among the other couples. "I have an excellent partner," he replied with a smile that reached his eyes. "And please, after all we've been through together, can't it just be Sam?" She laughed, the sound free and unguarded. "Sam it is, then, and I'm just Olivia." "There's nothing just about you, Olivia Moore," he said softly, his expression growing more serious. "You're the bravest, most remarkable woman I've ever known." The simple sincerity of his words touched something deep within her. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the rest of the room fading around them as the waltz drew to a close. The spell was broken by the band striking up a lively reel. Sam raised an eyebrow in question, and Olivia nodded eagerly, ready to lose herself in the energetic dance. They whirled and spun among the other dancers, laughing when they occasionally missed a step, enjoying the simple pleasure of movement and music and each other's company. Later, flushed and slightly breathless, they retreated to the refreshment table for cool drinks. A woman Olivia recognized from church approached them, her expression friendly but curious. "Olivia, dear, it's so lovely to see you enjoying yourself," the woman said, her gaze flickering between Olivia and Sam with barely concealed interest. "And Mr. Zimmerman, isn't it? I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I'm Mrs. Henderson." Sam nodded politely. "A pleasure, madam." "I understand you're a carpenter," Mrs. Henderson continued, her tone making it clear this was merely preliminary to the questions she really wanted to ask. "Yes, madam. Working with Mr. Daniels on the new houses over on Crockett Street." "How nice. And you two met?" "On the road from Terlingua, I believe." Such a romantic story, the way Martha tells it. Olivia tensed slightly, anticipating judgment or disapproval, but Mrs. Henderson's smile remained genuine. "Reminds me of how I met my Harold, God rest his soul," the older woman continued before either could respond. "He pulled me from a runaway carriage in New Orleans, saved my life and stole my heart in the same moment." She patted Olivia's arm. "When you find a good man, dear, you hold on to him. They're rare enough in this world." With that, she drifted away to join another group of church ladies, leaving Olivia and Sam in a somewhat awkward silence. "I'm sorry if that made you uncomfortable," Olivia said after a moment. "Martha must have shared more of our story than I realized." Sam shook his head, his expression thoughtful. "I'm not uncomfortable. Are you?" She considered the question honestly. "No," she realized. "I'm not. It's strange. 6 months ago, the thought of being the subject of gossip would have terrified me. Now, I find I don't particularly care what people think." A slow smile spread across Sam's face. "That's a kind of freedom too, isn't it?" "Yes," she agreed, something warm unfurling in her chest at his understanding. "Yes, it is." The band began a slower tune and Sam offered his hand. Another dance. As they moved together on the floor, Olivia was acutely aware of Sam's hand at her waist, the solid warmth of him, the way his eyes never left her face. Something had shifted between them tonight, a recognition of feelings that had been growing for months, now impossible to ignore or deny. When the dance ended, Sam didn't immediately release her hand. "Would you like to step outside for some air?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. "It's getting rather warm in here." The night air was indeed cooler, though still warm with the lingering heat of the July day. They walked a little way from the hall to a small garden area where benches had been placed for those seeking respite from the crowded dance floor. The music drifted out to them, muted but still audible. They sat side by side, not touching but close enough that Olivia could feel the warmth radiating from Sam's body. For a while, they simply enjoyed the relative quiet and the canopy of stars above them. "Olivia," Sam said finally, his voice soft in the darkness. "There's something I've been wanting to tell you, something I've been feeling for some time now." Her heart quickened, a mixture of anticipation and nervous energy coursing through her. "Yes." He turned to face her, his expression serious but warm. "When we met, you were in the worst moment of your life and I was running from mine. I never expected." He paused, searching for words. "I never expected to find someone like you, someone who would make me want to stop running." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. "Sam, please, let me finish," he said gently. "I know your divorce isn't final yet. I know you're still healing from what you endured with Victor. I don't want to rush you or pressure you in any way." He took a deep breath. "But I need you to know that I've fallen in love with you, Olivia Moore. Completely, irreversibly in love. And whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here, waiting." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, not of sadness, but of a joy so intense it was almost painful. "Oh, Sam," she whispered, reaching for his hand. "I've been falling in love with you since that first day in Terlingua when you stood between me and a world that wanted to break me." The hope that dawned on his face was beautiful to behold. "Truly, truly," she confirmed, squeezing his hand. "But I was afraid that you saw me only as someone to protect, someone broken and needing rescue." "Never," he said firmly. "From the moment I saw you stand up to Victor in that saloon, I knew you had more courage in your little finger than most men have in their entire bodies. I admired you then. I admire you even more now, seeing how you've rebuilt your life, piece by piece." Olivia felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. "I love you, Samuel Zimmerman," she said, the words feeling right and natural on her lips. "And while I may not be ready for everything just yet, I don't want to wait to tell you that." The smile that spread across Sam's face was like the sunrise after the darkest night. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward. Olivia met him halfway, her eyes fluttering closed as their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and respectful but filled with promise. When they drew apart, Sam rested his forehead against hers, his hand coming up to cup her cheek tenderly. "We have all the time in the world," he murmured. "I'm not going anywhere." In that moment, under the vast Texas sky filled with stars, Olivia felt the last shadows of her past begin to recede. The future stretched before them, uncertain in its details but secure in one essential truth. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Autumn brought cooler temperatures to San Antonio, and for Olivia, the final decree of her divorce. The document arrived by post on a crisp October morning, the legal terminology confirming what she had known in her heart for months. She was free. Martha found her sitting on the front porch, the papers in her lap, tears streaming silently down her face. "Oh, my dear," her cousin said, settling beside her on the swing. "Are those happy tears or sad ones?" "Both, I think," Olivia admitted, wiping her cheeks. "Relief, certainly, but also grief, in a way. For the girl I was, who believed in love and marriage and thought she would have a very different life than the one she got." Martha wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "That girl isn't gone, Livy. She's right here, a little wiser, a little stronger, but still believing in love. I see it every time Sam comes to call." Olivia smiled through her tears. "He's been so patient, Martha, so kind and understanding." "He loves you," Martha said simply. "Real love is patient. It waits, it endures, it gives without demanding in return. She squeezed Olivia's shoulders. Your father would have approved of him, you know. He always said he wanted you to find a man with a gentle heart and strong hands. The thought of her father's approval brought fresh tears to Olivia's eyes, but they were healing tears. I wish he could have met Sam. I think he knows, Martha said softly. Somehow, I think he knows. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the gentle creaking of the porch swing the only sound beyond the occasional birdsong. What will you do now? Martha asked eventually. Now that it's official. Olivia looked down at the papers in her lap, running her fingers over the embossed seal of the court. I'm not sure, she admitted. Sam and we haven't really discussed the future in concrete terms. He's been so careful not to pressure me. But if he were to ask, Martha prompted gently. A slow smile spread across Olivia's face, warmth blooming in her chest. If he were to ask, I would say yes, she said softly, with all my heart. That evening, when Sam called after finishing work at the carpentry shop, Olivia showed him the divorce papers. They sat together on the porch swing, Martha having tactfully excused herself to attend to urgent matters in the kitchen. So it's done, Sam said, carefully folding the papers and returning them to her. How do you feel? Olivia considered the question, wanting to give him a truthful answer. Lighter, she said finally. As though I've been carrying a weight for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like not to have it pressing on me, and now it's gone. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Freedom is like that. You don't realize how heavy the chains were until they're removed. Exactly, she smiled, turning to face him more fully. But there's something else, Sam, something I've been wanting to tell you. His expression grew serious, though his eyes remained warm as they met hers. What is it, Olivia? She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You've been so patient, so respectful of my need to heal and find myself again. But I don't want to wait anymore. Hope flickered across his face, though he kept his voice carefully neutral. Wait for what? For us, she said simply. For whatever comes next. I love you, Samuel Zimmerman. I'm free now, truly free in every sense, and I want to share that freedom with you if you'll have me. For a moment, Sam seemed stunned, as though he'd been waiting so long for this moment that he couldn't quite believe it had arrived. Then a smile broke across his face like the sun emerging from behind clouds. If I'll have you, he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. Olivia, loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. Being allowed to stand beside you, to watch you reclaim your strength and your joy. He shook his head, words failing him momentarily. There's nothing I want more than to share whatever comes next with you. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, holding it in his closed fist for a moment. I've been carrying this for weeks, he admitted with a rueful smile. Waiting for the right moment, waiting for you to be ready. He opened his hand to reveal a simple but elegant ring, a small pearl nestled in a setting of polished silver. It's not diamonds or gold, but it's perfect, Olivia whispered, her eyes filling with tears. It's absolutely perfect. Sam slid from the swing to kneel before her, taking her hand in his. Olivia Moore, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you as happy as you've made me? Yes, she said without hesitation, joy bubbling up inside her like a spring. Yes, with all my heart. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Olivia was struck by the contrast between this moment and the day she had agreed to marry Victor. Then, she had been filled with resignation and duty, sacrificing herself for her father's sake. Now, she chose freely, with clear eyes and a full heart, knowing exactly who Sam was and who she herself had become. He rose to sit beside her again, and she leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder as his arm encircled her. They sat that way for a long time, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, content in their shared happiness and the promise of the future stretching before them. From the window, Martha watched them with a satisfied smile, discreetly wiping away a tear. She had seen enough of life's cruelties to recognize a genuine miracle when it appeared. Two wounded souls finding healing in each other's company, darkness giving way to light, fear transformed into hope. "Well done, Thomas," she whispered, thinking of her long-departed cousin, Olivia's father. "Your daughter found her way home after all." The wedding took place on a perfect spring day in April of 1876, exactly 1 year after Sam had first seen Olivia being dragged through the streets of Terlingua. The symmetry of the timing was not lost on either of them, a full circle of seasons bringing them from that darkest day to this brightest one. They chose to marry in the small church, where Olivia and Martha attended services, with only close friends in attendance. Olivia wore a gown of ivory silk, simple but elegant, which she had designed and sewn herself with help from the other women at the dress shop, where she now worked as a full partner rather than a mere employee. As Sam watched her walk down the aisle toward him, radiant in the sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows, he felt a sense of wonder that still took him by surprise. The lost, broken woman he had first seen in Terlingua had blossomed into this confident, joyful person who had chosen, against all odds, to entrust her heart to him. When they spoke their vows, their voices were clear and steady, each word a promise made in full awareness of its weight and meaning. They had both seen how easily vows could be broken, how the words "till death do us part" could become a prison sentence rather than a blessing. Their commitment to each other was made with eyes wide open, choosing love freely rather than from obligation or fear. After the ceremony, they celebrated with a small reception in Martha's garden, which was bursting with spring flowers. Friends from the church, from Sam's carpentry work, and from Olivia's dress shop gathered to share their joy, offering congratulations and well wishes for their future together. As the afternoon waned, Sam found a moment alone with his new wife beneath the shade of an old oak tree at the far end of the garden. "Happy, Mrs. Zimmerman?" he asked, still savoring the sound of her new name on his lips. Olivia smiled up at him, her eyes reflecting the contentment in her heart. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, reaching up to touch his face gently. "And you? Any regrets about tying yourself to a woman with such a scandalous past?" He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "Only that I didn't find you sooner, before you had to endure so much pain." His expression grew serious. "But Olivia, nothing in your past is scandalous. You survived. You escaped. You rebuilt your life. There's no shame in any of that, only courage." She leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence and unwavering support. "I love you, Samuel Zimmerman," she said softly, "for truly seeing me when everyone else looked away." "And I love you," he replied, his arms encircling her waist, "for showing me that even the darkest path can lead to light if you're brave enough to keep walking." They remained that way for a long moment, wrapped in each other's embrace, savoring the peace they had found together. Then, hand in hand, they returned to their guests, ready to celebrate the beginning of their shared future. The house Sam built for them on the outskirts of San Antonio was modest but solidly constructed, designed with care to incorporate elements they both loved. Large windows to let in natural light, a covered porch where they could sit in the evenings, and a small garden that Olivia filled with herbs and flowers. As summer turned to fall and then to winter, they settled into the rhythms of married life. Olivia continued her work at the dress shop, her designs gaining popularity among San Antonio's ladies, while Sam's reputation as a skilled carpenter grew, bringing steady work and increasing prosperity. Martha remained a beloved presence in their lives, visiting often and always welcomed with open arms. She marveled at the transformation in her young cousin, at the confidence that now infused Olivia's every movement, the ready laugh that came so easily, the passionate opinions she no longer hesitated to express. "Marriage suits you," Martha remarked one afternoon as they sat together in Olivia and Sam's kitchen, sharing tea and freshly baked bread. "Both of you." Sam, who had just come in from his workshop at the back of the property, smiled as he washed the sawdust from his hands. "Having the right partner makes all the difference," he said, his eyes meeting Olivia's across the room. The look that passed between them spoke volumes of private communication born of deep understanding and shared experiences. Martha observed it with satisfaction, grateful that her cousin had found not just safety but genuine happiness after her ordeal. In the spring of 1877, as the second anniversary of their first meeting approached, Olivia discovered she was expecting their first child. She told Sam on a quiet evening as they sat on their porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "A baby," Sam repeated, wonder and a touch of fear mingling in his voice as he placed his hand gently over hers on her still flat stomach. Are you happy about this?" Olivia studied his face, understanding the source of his uncertainty. They had discussed children, of course, but always in abstract terms, both aware of the shadows from their pasts that sometimes still lingered. "I am," she said softly, covering his hand with her own. "I'm nervous, of course, but mostly, I'm happy. The idea of creating a family with you, Sam, a real family, built on love and respect and kindness, it feels like the final piece of healing I didn't know I needed." Relief and joy transformed his expression. "A family," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Something I thought I'd never have after." He didn't need to finish the thought. They both knew he was thinking of the little girl who had died in the crossfire during his last mission as a ranger, the tragedy that had sent him riding south with no destination in mind. "You'll be a wonderful father," Olivia said with absolute certainty. "You have so much love to give, Sam, and so much wisdom to share." He pulled her gently into his arms, his cheek resting against her hair. "And you'll be an extraordinary mother. Our child will be the luckiest person in Texas, having you to guide them." As the months passed, and Olivia's body changed to accommodate their growing child, Sam's protective instincts intensified. He hovered anxiously when she insisted on continuing her work at the dress shop, though he never tried to forbid it, a fact for which Olivia was profoundly grateful. Instead, he channeled his energy into preparing their home, building a cradle from the finest oak he could find and constructing a rocking chair for the nursery that was a masterpiece of comfort and craftsmanship. When their son was born on a cold January night in 1878, Sam paced outside their bedroom while Martha and the midwife attended Olivia through her labor. The hours of waiting were among the most agonizing of his life, each of Olivia's muffled cries cutting through him like a knife. Finally, as dawn broke over the horizon, the bedroom door opened to reveal Martha, tired but smiling. "You have a son, Sam," she said, her voice warm with joy. "A beautiful, healthy boy. And Olivia is fine, exhausted but fine. You can go in now." The sight that greeted him as he entered the bedroom would remain etched in his memory forever. Olivia, pale but radiant, propped up against the pillows with a tiny bundle cradled in her arms. She looked up as he approached, her face illuminated with a love so pure it took his breath away. "Come meet your son," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the hours of labor. Sam sat carefully on the edge of the bed, his hands trembling slightly as Olivia passed him the swaddled infant. The baby's face was red and slightly squashed from the birth, with a dusting of dark hair across his head. As Sam cradled him, the tiny boy opened his eyes blue, as all newborns were, though Sam secretly hoped they would turn green like his mother's in time. "He's perfect," Sam managed, his voice choked with emotion. "Absolutely perfect." "What shall we name him?" Olivia asked softly. They had discussed several possibilities, but had decided to wait until they met their child before making a final choice. Sam studied the tiny face, feeling a surge of protectiveness and love unlike anything he had ever experienced. "What about Thomas?" he suggested. "After your father." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. "Thomas," she repeated, testing the name. "Yes, Thomas Samuel Zimmerman." "Samuel," he echoed, surprised by her addition of his own name. She reached out to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his cheek. "For the man who saved us both," she said simply. "The man who taught me that love doesn't have to hurt, that strength can be gentle, that freedom is found in choosing rather than in running away." Sam captured her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm, too overwhelmed to speak. In that moment, holding his son and looking into the eyes of the woman he loved, he felt a sense of completion, of having finally arrived at a destination he hadn't known he was seeking. The journey from that dusty street in Terlingua to this quiet bedroom in San Antonio had been long and often difficult. Both he and Olivia carried scars that would never fully fade, visible ones on her body, invisible ones in his soul. But they had found in each other not just healing but a new beginning, a chance to build something beautiful from the ashes of their pasts. As the first rays of sunlight streamed through the bedroom window, illuminating the three of them in its golden glow, Sam made a silent vow to his newborn son. Thomas would grow up knowing only love and safety, respect and kindness. He would learn that true strength lies not in domination, but in protection, not in causing fear, but in creating sanctuary. And he would know, every day of his life, that he was born from a love that had overcome the darkest odds, a love that began when a cowboy stood in the way of cruelty and said simply, "Enough." In the years that followed, the Zimmerman family thrived. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's quiet determination. He was joined 2 years later by a sister, Margaret, named for Olivia's mother, and Martha, whose steady presence remained a blessing in their lives until her peaceful passing in the winter of 1882. San Antonio grew around them, the small frontier town transforming gradually into a bustling city. Sam's carpentry business expanded to include 3 apprentices, and a reputation that brought commissions from as far away as Austin and Houston. Olivia's dress shop became one of the most respected establishments in the city, her designs sought after by women of all social classes who appreciated their elegance and practicality. They never returned to Terlingua, though occasionally news reached them through travelers or old acquaintances. They learned that Sheriff Jenkins had eventually been voted out of office, replaced by a younger man with more progressive ideas about justice. Victor Moore, after serving a brief sentence for assault, had left town under a cloud of scandal and debt, reportedly heading for California. No one seemed to know or care what had become of him after that. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Sam surprised Olivia with a special gift, a locket containing miniature portraits of Thomas and Margaret, painted by a traveling artist who had recently visited San Antonio. On the back, he had inscribed a simple message: "For the woman who taught me the meaning of enough." Olivia questioned him about it as they sat on their porch swing that evening, the children already tucked into bed, the spring air soft around them. "What does it mean?" she asked, running her finger over the inscription. "The meaning of enough," Sam smiled, his arm comfortably around her shoulders. At 42, his dark hair was beginning to show strands of silver at the temples, and fine lines had appeared around his eyes, evidence, Olivia liked to think, of a decade spent smiling more than frowning. "When I first saw you in Terlingua," he explained, "being dragged through that street, I said one word: enough. It was instinct more than anything else, the simple recognition that what was happening was wrong and had to stop." Olivia nodded, remembering that moment with a clarity that had never dimmed despite the passage of time. "I remember. It was the first time anyone had ever stood up for me against Victor or the town. But over the years," Sam continued, "I've come to understand that enough means so much more than just stopping something wrong. It means recognizing when something is right, when it's complete, when it's exactly what you need." He tightened his arm around her slightly. "You and our children, this life we've built together, it's enough. More than enough. It's everything I never knew I was looking for until I found you." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes at the simple eloquence of his words. After a decade of marriage, Sam still had the ability to surprise her with the depth of his feeling, to make her heart swell with love just when she thought it couldn't possibly hold any more. "It's enough for me too," she whispered, leaning into his embrace. "More than I ever dreamed possible." As they sat together in the gathering twilight, the sounds of the city muted by distance and the gentle rustle of the oak trees around their property, Olivia reflected on the long journey that had brought them to this moment of peace and contentment. The scars of her past had faded to almost nothing, faint silver lines on her skin, distant memories that no longer held power over her present. The nightmares that had once plagued her had long since ceased, replaced by dreams of future possibilities. The fear that had been her constant companion during her years with Victor was now so foreign to her daily experience that she sometimes marveled at the woman she had once been, at the courage it had taken to finally say enough in her own way. Sam, too, had found healing. The guilt that had driven him to leave the Rangers had gradually eased, though he still occasionally lit a candle in church for the little girl who had died in that long-ago shootout. He had learned to forgive himself, to accept that while he couldn't change the past, he could honor it by living fully in the present and working toward a better future. Together, they had built something neither had believed possible when they first met: a life of quiet joy, of mutual respect, of love freely given and gratefully received. It wasn't perfect. They had their disagreements, their moments of frustration or misunderstanding. But the foundation was solid, built on honesty and kindness rather than fear and control. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Olivia turned to face her husband, cupping his cheek in her hand as she had countless times over their years together. "I love you, Samuel Zimmerman," she said softly, the words no less meaningful for having been spoken so often. "Thank you for standing in the way that day. Thank you for saying enough when I couldn't say it myself." "I love you too, Olivia Zimmerman," he replied, covering her hand with his own. "And I always will, until my last breath and beyond." In that moment, as in so many quiet moments they had shared over the years, they both recognized the truth of what they had found together. Not just an escape from their separate pasts, but a journey toward a shared future, one built on the simple, revolutionary premise that love should bring freedom rather than bondage, joy rather than fear, healing rather than harm. It was indeed enough, more than enough. It was everything,